Okay, let's start our discussion of Shiur number 7. We have Shiur number 7 here of the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat, and we again are using the volume 16, the Wise Family volume of the Tzurba seforim, the Lax Family Edition. We are up to Shiur number 7 out of 8 in this first volume, and also today's Shiur is sponsored by the Abramowitz family in memory of Elchanan's father, Zichron Lebracha, Shraga Feivel David ben Kemuel, who was Niftar Chavdal Kislev Tuf Shin Pei. So we thank the Abramowitz family for the sponsorship. So today's Shiur, which we will get into, has to do with Talmud Torah, has to do with Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum, which is a din d'Rabbanan, as we'll see where it came from. Some of the Mafarshim say it goes way back. So we have Shnayim Mikra. Related to that, we'll talk a little bit about learning on Shabbos in general. We'll get to Keriat HaTorah on Shabbos, which is not a form of Talmud Torah exactly, or maybe it is. Maybe it's a special form of Talmud Torah, and then we'll get into Maftir, Haftorah, and related issues, which takes us through everything having to do with Shabbos, relating to Tefillah and Torah. And then we'll get to next year when we start the discussions of Kiddush, which will be a number of Shiurim. So we start with the Gemara Maseches Brachos, the source for Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. One of the statements that are come up in Maseches Brachos of something that gives you long life. There are a number of them, but this is one of them. You're on Brachos Daf Ches, source number 1. We're on page 277 here in the Tzurba Meirabanan Choveret. Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar Rav Imi. A person should be mashlim, should complete his parshios with the tzibur. Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Twice psukim and one targum, which Pashup Pshat Targum means unkelis. Unkelis, which goes way back. Va'afilu ateres v'divon. Even a pasuk like Ateres and Divon, which has no Targum translation. So you might think that the Targum is not adding anything because it's just repeating the words. That's Rashi. She'ein bo Targum. Still, you have to say it. Shekol mashlim parshios v'matzibur. Anyone who is mashlim, somebody who completes the parshios with the tzibur, so ma'arichim lo yamav ushnosav. He is marich his life, his days, and his years. He has a arichos yamim. There is a remez to this in the Torah itself, the Balaturim. All the way at the beginning of Sefer Shmos, the Balaturim quotes on the Eila Shmos B'nai Yisrael. Says the Balaturim, this is not in your packet, but he says Rashi Tevis, the first Balaturim on Sefer Shmos. Va'adam asher lomed haseder. Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. That's the word Shmos. Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. B'kol na'im yashir. Yichyeh shanim rabos aruchim la'olam. Wow. So that's the Rashi Tevis of Eila Shmos B'nai Yisrael. The first 4 words in Sefer Shmos has a remez to Shnayim Mikra. But again, the real source, halachically, is the Gemara here in Maseches Brachos about Yashlim Parshiyosov. So the Gemara says you have to read it twice and once with the Targum. Is it only the Targum? Could you have any other commentary, translation? So we usually think of Unkelis as a translation, but it's not just a translation. There's a lot of diyukim. Right? The Unkelis is a Tana, is from that time period. So Tosfos there in Maseches Brachos Daf Ches says, really, Unkelis is Unkelis. Unkelis is Unkelis. He quotes, Yesh Befarshim, Tosfos in Brachos Daf Ches, source number 3, Yesh Befarshim, V'hu adin lo azus balas shalahen. He says there are those that say that it could be even in other languages. Havi kamo targum shemefarish lefamim, just like Targum explains sometimes. Ki kamosha targum mefarish la'am haaretz, just like the Targum could explain. Kachem evinim tochalaz, whatever language. And Tosfos says v'lo nehira. No, there's something magical about the Targum, about the Unkelis. Shia Targum mefarish b'mashein lilmod came mina ivri. You lose so much in a different translation. Like it says, like Rav Yosef says in Megillah Daf Gimel. Rav Yosef says this elsewhere also. Without the Targum, I wouldn't understand the pasuk. Al kain ein lomar b'shum lashon pam shlishis ki im b'lashon Targum. Tosfos is adamant. Tosfos says Dafka Unkelis. Unkelis has a special quality that other commentaries or translations don't have. But he is not the only, Bali Tosfos is not the only Shita. If you look in the Rush right there in Brachos and Siman Ches, the Rush says, V'nireh sha'akori b'firish HaTorah. If one reads Rashi, as we know, famous halacha, one can read Rashi instead of Onkelos. Yotze bo yedei Targum. Kivan shemafurish b'no. I'll call Mila v'Mila because after all, Rashi explains based on Chazal, and therefore Rashi could also use instead of Onkelos. This is a machlokas Rishonim. Look in the Smag, also one of the Bali Atosva Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol. He quotes in source number 5 that he thinks maybe Rashi should count, but his Rabbeim did not agree. Rabbeinu Yitzchak, Rav Amram, Rav Natrunai, he thought obviously the Gaonim were before Rashi, but he thinks that you have to use Dafka Onkelos, but the Shulchan Aruch quotes both. Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Pei Hey, that's the Siman about Shnayim Mikra. Interesting, I always thought Reish Pei Hey is from the word rafeh, weak. Sometimes people are weak in Shnayim Mikra, and we have to be mechazik it. So that's why Reish Pei Hey, there are certain simanim in Shulchan Aruch that, just the way the Gemara says, you have to create simanim for yourself to remember what siman. So Reish Pei Hey, right? The siman about my machronim is coffee, Kuf Pei Aleph, Kuf Pei Hey. I don't remember which one of them. We have coffee at the end of the meal. Anyway, so the Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Pei Hey, here in source number 6, in Laman Parsha appears Rashi, Chashav Kamo Targum. Rashi is considered like Targum. V'Yarei Shamayim Yikra Targum Agam appears Rashi. Yarei Shamayim should read Onkelos and Rashi. Onkelos and Rashi are Yarei Shamayim. Right, and the Mishnah Berurah explains why. Because each one has a Ma'al Yusa. The Targum has something that Rashi doesn't have, and Rashi has something that the Targum doesn't have. What does the Targum have? Nitna B'Sinai. Yesh lo ma'ala shenitan b'Sinai. V'gamu mefarish kol mila v'mila. And also Targum is every single word. Every single word is explained by Targum. Unlike Rashi. Rashi picks and chooses. He doesn't say the word, he explains. But also we have on the Maila of Rashi, Pirush Rashi Yesh lo ma'ala, shu mefarish ese'ina pi medrashei Chazal. Rashi explains based on Chazal. Yoser mi'at Targum. Targum doesn't explain based on Chazal. Ube'emes ken roy lenhog l'chal adam shilba b'kol shavua. Every week, everybody should read Shavua Hasidra in Pirush Rashi Levada Targum, because that is gives you both milos. Kish kama parshas b'Torah u'prapa chelef ha'yikra she'efshar lavinam klal idei Targum avad. Just Onkelos is not going to give you the pshat of the pasuk. So read Targum, read Rashi, and that will give you both. What if a pasuk doesn't have any Rashi on it? So the Mishnah Berurah says there. Then you read the pasuk again. Read the pasuk a third time. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Hey, source number 8. Alken Yozem Hashakori Beis Pa'amim Mikra ve'Echad Pirush Rashi. V'ozem Sukam She'en Elem Rashi Yikra Osan Shalosh Pa'amim. I always found this halacha amazing in that, how did Rashi make it in there? There's a halacha in the Gemara that says Yashlim Parshiosim Matzibur Shnayim Mikra ve'Echad Targum. That's the Gemara around the year 500. Rashi, who lived 600 years later, the Rishonim stick him in. The Rishonim say, oh, Rashi could count. Rashi could count? How could Rashi count to fulfill a din in the Gemara? The Gemara, that's the Gavus of Rashi. Rashi is unfathomable, his greatness. Rabbeinu Tam, his grandson, once said, I could fathom. Rabbeinu Tam is the most quoted Baal Tosfos on the page of Shas, and he said about his grandfather, about Rashi, he says, I could fathom how he wrote his commentary on Shas. We can't, but he could. I could gather how he wrote his commentary on Shas. I could fathom that, but I can't fathom how he wrote his commentary on Chumash. I can't. It's beyond. It's unbelievable. It's so powerful. So much is packed in. So that's Rabbeinu Tam. His brother, the Rashbam, actually writes at the beginning of Parshas Vayeshev that Rashi, his grandfather, told him that if he would have time, he was elderly when he had the conversation, maybe he would have changed some of the things in his commentary on Torah to be closer to Pshat. The Rashbam is a very big Pashtan. But again, those are two eduyos of the grandsons of Rashi in terms of his commentary on Torah. But the Rishonim obviously put Rashi in, and the halacha reflects the godless of Rashi. If you look in the continuing sources, again, the Or Letzion, Reb Ben Zion Abishol also discusses that to fulfill one's obligation, one should try to read the Targum Yerushalmi also. And that's not usually the accepted opinion. We'll try to do Onkelos and Rashi, right? Doing that's a Yerei Shamayim. That's already amazing if one can do this. What about something else? What about if I don't know Hebrew, if I don't know Aramaic? Could I use something else? So there are those. The Ber Heitev says that Vaday Roy Likros B'Fi Torah Sheish B'Lashon Ashkenaz, like Tzena Re'ena. You can use other commentaries, other translations. Right, in the Sefer Yogel Yaakov, they quote from Rav David Feinstein that you could read it in English. Targum Shal Rashi Ba'anglit. You could read a translation of Rashi. What does that mean? You can't read a translation of the Torah because that loses a lot. But Rashi, like they say, the stone chumash has a translation on top, but to read the bottom of the stone chumash along with what's on top, because that's a translation and then a commentary based on Chazal. So that would able to be, again, if one can't do Onkelos and Rashi, that's something that the poskim would say is also acceptable in this case. Again, to be to connect one with the Torah. What about the laning in shul? Does that count? Could I use laning in shul? So that's a discussion. The Magen Avraham there in Sif Reish Pehei, the Magen Avraham says in Reish Pehei Sif Katan Ches, source number 12, V'bshama pamachas b'shliach tzibur v'kor pamachas yatsa avayin lisboch lechadchila al shmiya. Better not to rely on the shmiya because it's about Shnayim Mikra. I've been asked before, can I just scan it? No, scanning is not this. Right, you have to learn it. Limud is thinking. Obviously, you get Talmud Torah. You get by thinking it. But this is a special din Yashlim Parshiyos of Matzibur to say it. The Mishnah Berurah does say that maybe there are those that say you cannot be Yotzei with the Chazan, but the Mishnah Berurah quotes even those who say not. If you say it along with the Chazan quietly, so then one would be able to be Yotzei that way, and that's what many do. Read quietly. You can't disturb anyone else listening to the Kriya. But says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat and Beis Yudalit, in source number 13, Mikam Makom Nira Delikro Belachash Mila Bemila, to read it quietly, word by word. Im Ashatz Ein Lahachmir Bazeh. Then, if one doesn't have time to do it twice during the week, so that could count as one. Kivan Shemachavin Oz Gam Lishmoa Kol Teva Mipi Ashatz. Right, so it's Shomei Kohanim. It's more than Shomei Kohanim. You're saying it. So if you're saying it along with the Chazan, that is okay. Maggid Avram Hevi B'Shem Mate Moshe Delachad Chilo Nachon Lasos Kain. That is okay, and that's what the Yalkut Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, also says. Amisha Shah Dechuka Lo B'Yoser. If you do not have enough time, so then one can again say it with the Chazan. Vein Lo Pnai Klal L'Gro Latzmo Shnayim Mikra Nachon Lahoros Lo Sheyikra Balacha Just Kol Parsha. You can say it quietly with the Chazan. Im Ashliach Tzibur Hakori Batorah Pasik B'Pasik V'Shuv Yachzer V'Yikrena Pam Shiniya B'Beso, and then you could read it again in your house along with the Targ. Good. What exactly is the best way to do Shnayim Mikra? Right, we say Shnayim Mikra v'chatargum. Right, we could think of a couple of ways. You could say the whole parsha once, then you could say the whole parsha twice, then you could say the targum. You could do pasuk targum. You could do section psukim targum. All different ways to do it. So there are different dayas, and lamaisa, whatever one does is fine. But the Mishnah Berurah quotes, "Ubinyan kriya yesh deos bazeh bein achronim yesh omrim shikra kol pasuk beis pa'amim v'targum alav." Says the Mishnah Berurah. I'm on page 282 now in source 15. Some say that a person should read every pasuk twice and then a targum. V'yesh omrim shikra kol parsha beis pa'amim. Some say read the whole parsha twice v'achar kach targum. Haynu shikra kol parsha psuchu stuma. Not the whole parsha, the whole section of psukim beis pa'amim v'achar kach targum. Magen Avraham and the Shari Tshuva quote by the first day, the first view. The Ma'aser Rav, the Gra, says he did every psuchu stuma, and then different opinions. The Aruch HaShulchan quotes the third opinion based on the Or Zarua, that you can say the whole parsha, what we call the parsha. V'yesha koren kol hasidra, says the Aruch HaShulchan. V'yachar kach pam sheni, v'yachar kach hatargum, v'chei meduvar midivrei Or Zarua, v'nira lanias daiti ein kpeda. Chazal didn't specify. V'yachal lasos kamoshe yirtzeh. L'kulam yesh panim bahalacha ve'efshar shegam yachol lasos pamim kach. You could also switch off. Says the Aruch HaShulchan. V'sal kedaitach sheish kpeda lasos dafka kach o kach. If there was a real kpeda to do it one way or the other, lo avishaski rabuseinu harishonim ilafarsha. The Rishonim wouldn't have been quiet about it. They would have said. So the fact that they didn't say anything means one could do it any way one wants. Good. Do you have to have the Targum, though, third? Like, can you have Mikra, Targum, Mikra? Could you have the Targum in the middle? So the Aruch HaShulchan also has that suffix in Reish Pei Sif Gimel. And he says, V'yeshlis topic in Surah 17, Ibina Dafka Shnayim Mikro, Mikodem V'yachar Kach Targum, Oshiyatza Kishakara Mikro, V'targum Mikra. So he has a suffix about it. But l'chora, if one wants or needs to do that, one can do it in that way. The Chazon Ish also permits reading the Targum in the middle. But Lamaisa, whatever one does is good. This is fulfilling the takana of being mashlim parshiyosei v'matzibur. That's Shabbos. We didn't get to the root issue, though, of is there a, let's say we might call it a ta'am hamitzvah behind this halacha? So maybe it could be reflected in a nafkamina. What about yantif? Sometimes we have a Shabbat that's a yantif. So we might know the halacha. Let's go backwards for a second. Sometimes we say, okay, there's no Shnayim Mikra this week. But it's yantif. So is there Shnayim Mikra on yantif or is there not? So that's a question. That's a discussion in the Tzurba Hadeshen. The Tzurba Hadeshen, Rabbi Yisrael Israelin, again, one of the late Rishonim, 1400s or so, almost every Tzurba Hadeshen is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch or in the Ramah. So the Tzurba Hadeshen in the second volume, Psakim Chelik Beis, he was asked this question. He was asked whether one has a chiyah to do Shnayim Mikra. Is that called Mashlam Parshiyos V'Matzibor? So the Tzurba Hadeshen gets into, so what's the reason? What's the reason for Shnayim Mikra? Is number one, to be ready for the Keriat HaTorah, which also reflects on when you should do it. Is that what it's about? So then it should be even on Yontif too. So I want to be ready for the Keriat HaTorah. Or is it something else? It's not about to be ready for the Keriat HaTorah, but he says, Dafka Parsha Shabbos Chayv Lahashlam Ava Ein Tzarach Ligvos Parshas Yontif. The Tzurba Hadeshen, the Beis Yosef quotes the Tzurba Hadeshen, but it's the Tzurba Hadeshen in Chelik Beis that not on Yontif. V'yafal Bisha Kasav Delapir Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel, according to his svara, he was the one that just said it's based on the fact that you should be ready for the laning. Or others say, just in case they call you up to lane, and Yantif you should also, but Kvar Kasav, Lashar Gaonim, that's not the reason. Ein Sarech, Fishakarov Be'enav Shalom Nagar Basina Lahashlim. It's not the minhag v'chein debar. We don't have the minhag of, or the halacha of Shnayim Mikra applying to Yantif. And the Shulchan Aruch passes that way. In source 19, the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Behei, Ein Sarech Likros B'Yantif. So why? So what's the svara then? But there's another idea, and that is every Jew should be connected to the Torah. Once a year at least, to get through Hashem's autobiography. Once a year. So then the Yantif lanings you don't have to do because you've already got that when you get up to there in the regular laning. Once a year, every Jew should connect to Hashem's autobiography. Remember, the Torah has such deep meaning. The Ramban in the Hakdama to his commentary on the Torah, right? We just mentioned before the godless of Rashi. The Ramban calls Rashi the Bechor. Lo mishpata bechora. That's what he says in the Hakdama. But there also, towards the end of the Hakdama, the Ramban writes that all the Torah, on some Kabbalistic level, spells out Shem Hashem. Kol Torah kula shmosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So every Jew, the halacha is that every Jew should be connected to the Shem Hashem, to the Hashem's word, and therefore, that's Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum. Remember, there was somebody in a balabas that I used to have that every Simchas Torah used to come over to me with tears in his eyes and say, Rabbi Rosner, 26 years. Rabbi Rosner, he was so connected, and Simchas Torah when he finished Zos HaBracha, it was so inspiring. And to see how the Torah connected to this Jew. But that's how we have to feel. Shnayim Mikra is our connection to Torah, and we get through it at least once a year. Chazal enacted at least once a year. Every Jew should get through the Torah. So according to that, though, if that's the svaris, then one wouldn't have to do it for Yantif. And he quotes that from the Lavush has that idea. The Lavush has that idea too. If you look in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan here quotes this Lavush that says the purpose of Shnayim Mikra is to becoming proficient in the Torah, to knowing the Torah. Says the Aruch HaShulchan in 20. Ubevade, look at this line. B'shah shetikein Moshe Rabbeinu likros b'Torah. The Aruch HaShulchan, the great posting from Navardik, assumes that when Hashem gave the Torah, this was part of it. When Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, and when Moshe Rabbeinu was misakein Keriat HaTorah, Moshe Rabbeinu was also misakein this halacha. Tikin gam kein takana zu shekol echad yikra Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum. It goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he quotes the Lavush, she baki b'Torah. I expanded upon that a baki b'Torah means every Jew should have that deep connection to Torah, and therefore one has to focus on it and take it very seriously. Take it very seriously. This also relates to the idea, possibly Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky writes in his Hakdama to his Sefer, Hakdama to Emes Yaakov, he says, why twice? Okay, every Jew should be connected to Torah, Shnayim Mikra, so I have Echad Mikra. What needs Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum? So he says, the first is a mitzvah of Kriya, and the second is a mitzvah of Limud. It's a Limud. Limud needs a commentary. So maybe that connects, like, get enough to mean it to the order. Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum, one is a Kriya and one is Kriya with Targum. because the second one is a din limud. That's what Rabbi Yaakov says. Yesh kan shnei mitzvahs. Achad hi mitzvah kriya ba'alma. Beis mitzvahs halimud shel parsha. Lefichach. That's what he says. Sorach mitchil lavar al parsha b'kriya. First read the whole parsha. V'acharkach shuv sorach ulumod as a parsha. Because the second time is always deeper. It's always deeper. Chazara. I think that Netziv points that out on the Gemara in Megillah, which says Chayav Adam. Right. You have to read the Megillah. V'leshanosa bayom. And the Talmidim thought, the Gemara about in Megillah Tav Dalet or so, the Gemara thought that the Talmidim thought that this means to learn about Megillah. And he said, no, it means to read it again. But reading it again, because you read it a second time, that's why the Netziv says the Ikar reading of Megillah is the daytime reading. That's why you make a Shechianu again, according to Ashkenaz custom. That's the Ikar. Why? Because that's deeper. That's limud. That's not just a kriya. And that's what Rabbi Yaakov says to explain why it's Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. Good. So we have every Shabbos. Yantif, the minhag is no chiyuv of Shnayim Mikra on Yantif. What about Haftorah? We'll get to where Haftorah comes from, but the Ramah says no. The Ramah says, Ein Sarech Likros Haftoris, Mikam Akom Nagu. Okay, if you want to, great, but there's no chiyuv. When is the chiyuv? Right? Kalamashlim Parshiyosef Im Hatzibur. What does that mean? And just by the way, it's not in your packet. But the many poskim paskin that even an avil toch shiva could be mashlim, could learn on Shabbos Shnayim Mikra, because it connects you to the tzibur. It's not just personal learning; it connects you to the tzibur, and therefore, even an avil is allowed to learn that. He's allowed to learn that. No, can't learn anything else. That's sort of davar shabbat on Shabbos is noheg, but at least Shnayim Mikra. So when's the earliest time? When's the latest time? So when's the earliest time? Im atzibur. So Tosfos says brachas davches source 22. When do we start talking about next week's parsha? Mincha on Shabbos. I think we spoke about it in the previous shiur, right? Rav Nevin Zal's beautiful thought that we always learn the next week's parsha to remind the Jew that there's always a next week, there's always a next step, there's always a future. So Tosfos and brachas. Yashlam parsha Yosef v'matzibur. Nire to call hashavua mikiva demaschilun likros parsha dahainu minchas Shabbos ve'elech at Shabbos haba nikres ematzibur. Imatzibur means from Shabbos mincha time until, I guess, Shabbos mincha time of the next week. That's Im Hatzibur. Some say that Tosfos doesn't mean it dafka Shabbos afternoon mincha time, but maybe Sunday. The Kolbo quotes that it's Sunday, v'dafka miyom echad ve'elach. Avol b'Shabbos b'mincha, afilu achrei shekora parsha b'tzibur lo yatsa. That's not called. People are still focusing on that day's parsha. So we lane it, Keriat HaTorah. But the Mashlim Parshiyosef Im Hatzibur, says the Kolbo, that we have to wait till Sunday. The Shulchan Aruch's lashon is like the Kolbo, Sunday. Miyom Rishon ve'elech chashav matzibur. From Sunday, that's in matzibur. The Mishnah Berurah, though, is not convinced that the Shulchan Aruch is passing like the Kolbo. He thinks maybe it's lav dafka. Umashakasav ha'machaber miyom Rishon ve'elech lav dafkahu. If you really want to get a head start, you could ready from mincha on erev on Shabbos afternoon. Mincha on Shabbos afternoon. So now the question is, okay, mincha. So what does that mean, mincha? Does that mean when the time for mincha comes? Does it mean when you davened mincha? What does that mean? So if you look in the Shmir Shabbos paskins, u'mistaver tahainu mizman mincha gedola shero'ui kfar likro etz haparsha chadasha. It's the most makel within this. From the time of mincha gedola, he does not require you to daven. He does not require a later mincha. Rav Chaim Kanievsky is quoted as disagreeing that no, it's only once the person daven mincha. It's like a personal. Now you are in the next week. You daven mincha. You already heard the parsha for next week. So that's when you can. You can late it. That's in terms of the earliest time to start. What at the latest time? So Tosfos there in Brachas Davches quotes a medrash about the end of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's life. The Gemara talks about this at the end of Ksubas 2. There's Yerushalmi, but the Tosfos says Gimel Dvarim Siv Rabbeinu Kadosh Labanav B'Shah Sheniftar. Number 1, Shelo Tochlu Lechem B'Shabbos Ad Shetigmru Kol HaParsha. Don't eat until you finish the parsha. Mashba Dekodem Achila Tzorach Lashlim. Before you start eating on Shabbos, does this mean at night? Does this mean in the morning? Might be in the morning, but you have to finish the parsha before you start eating on Shabbos. That's l'chadchila to finish it before you eat on Shabbos. The Torah quotes mitzvah menamufchar she'ashlim osa kodem she'ocha b'Shabbos. What if you didn't? What if you didn't finish? V'im lo yishlam osa kodem achila yashlam achar achila kodem mincha, which gives me the impression that he's talking about Shabbos morning eating. not mukhrach. But if you didn't finish it by eating, then finish it by mincha, which is, as we just said, it might be the earliest time to start the next week. So that's imat tzibur. Says the Torah. After that, it's wonderful to do, and maybe it's a kiyum of connecting every Jew to all the Torah every year, but you kind of lose the imat tzibur. That goes by manios is even more makel than that. He says you have till Wednesday. You have till Wednesday, just like Havdalah. And if you didn't get till Wednesday, you have till Shmini Atzeres, when the whole tzibur finishes Zos HaBracha. That's the Agos B'Monios, source 29, one of the great Chachmei Ashkelon, the Agos B'Monios, and the Mordechai, both Talmidim of the Maharami Rutenberg. They were killed. Rachmana litzlan, and their Rebbe, the Maharami Rutenberg, was taken in jail. They were killed. That's when the Rosh ran away. The Rosh, Agos B'Monios, and the Mordechai were all Talmidim of the Maharami Rutenberg. So the Rosh ran away to Spain. When this was happening, that's where he was befriended by the Rashba. And amazingly, after the Rashba died, the Rosh became the Gadol Ador in Spain. This Ashkenazic Jew just shows you how beloved he was to the Rashba and to the people there. So the Agos B'Monios says, Bidi Eved, Imlo Hishlim Kodem Achila B'Shabbos, Yochel Hashlam Adalad B'Shabbos, till Wednesday. V'chein Matzazi B'Shem Mori Rabbeinu. V'kasev Rabbeinu Simcha. Even though the best time to do it is Shabbos, and finish it by Shabbos, finish it by eating, and if not, finish it by Mincha, and if not, finish it by Wednesday. If you didn't, Yashlim Kulam Bishmini Atzeres, Shvel Gomer Natzibur. Sometimes you see people learning a lot of Shnayim Mikra over Chol HaMoed Sukkos, because they're trying to, get it in there before the time runs out. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes all three opinions. All three opinions. Reish Pei Daled, Reish Pei Hesev Daled, source number 30. Mitzvah man hamufchar sheyashlim osa kodem sheyochel b'Shabbos. Try to finish it before eating. V'im lo ishlim kodem achila, yashlim acher achila to mincha. Try number 2 till mincha. V'yesh omrim ad revi b'Shabbos. V'yesh omrim ad shmini atzeres simchas Torah. So we should try to complete it before Shabbos, eating on Shabbos day. But the machlokas is how far you have, and there's a nice little chart in there on page 288 relating to this. What about women? Do women have a chiyuv of Shnayim Mikra ve'echat targum? So this might depend on what it's totally on. If the Shnayim Mikra is connected to Keriat HaTorah, like we said, maybe it's to get ready to hear the Kriya, and there are those that connect it to Keriat HaTorah, so then maybe women have a chiyuv to be part of the tzibur as much as possible. Don't have that. Some say they do, so maybe then they would be. But if it's connected, it's just a fancy form, a specific form of Talmud Torah that women are part of from Talmud Torah. Okay, they have to learn Torah in order to know about the mitzvahs, like the Ramah says in Yeridea, or the mitzvahs that are shayach to them. But this specific din, they would not be mechuyevin. So that's what Rav Yitzchak Yosef says, and others. It seems to be that this is a special form of Talmud Torah. So women want to do it. It's wonderful. Rav Malamed writes in Pedini Halacha in source 32, Tavo Alayim Bracha. It's beautiful for women to be connected to the Torah's Moshe as well. As we mentioned, every Jew being connected every year through the Rashi and through the Onkelos. But a chiyuv, not a chiyuv. And again, like we saw mentioned from Rabbi Yaakov before, there's a mitzvah of kriya, there's a mitzvah of limud, and therefore women would not be included in the chiyuv of it. It goes back a long time, but the Gaonim dealt with, there might be those that learn all day in yeshiva. I learn Ksos and Nesivis and Rekiva Egers. I'm going to learn Shnayim Mikra ve'echat targum. I don't have time for that. I'm a busy learner. I'm a chashuv learner. Already in the days of the Gaonim say, no, you have to do it. And just to put it into our generation, Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Orach Chaim Chelek, the last source in this section, source number 34, says Rav Moshe, he was asked by Bachrim, by Bachure Yeshiva, Binyan HaMitzvah Shemechuyev Kol Echad Ve'echad Likra B'Torah Kol HaShavua. Shenisrashel Ma'od Av Eitzel Harbi B'nei Torah. Many people are weak and don't focus on this. Pasha to Barur, says Rav Moshe, it's obvious. K'moshe lo niftar shuma de mikol mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Just like a person learning all day is not patur, is not exempt from any mitzvah d'Rabbanan. B'taina shosik b'Torah, mosik b'Torah. What, Torah su'um naso? We don't have that nowadays. Even the days of the Amoraim, they didn't have that. Kain lo niftar afi mitzvah zu. So too, there's no exemption of this mitzvah of Shnayim Mikra ve'echat targum. The Adarabba, just the opposite. Those who are proficient in all areas of learning have to be proficient in Rashi. Af misha Torah su'um naso k'Rashbi v'chaveirav. She'peturin mitfila d'Rabbanan. Hayu b'chayivim b'kriyas Shnayim Mikra v'chatargim. Over pralu doreinu, says Rav Moshe, especially in our generation, she'ena yicholam lo marshanu b'kiyin b'mikra. We're b'kiyin? No, we're not b'kiyin. And therefore, Shnayim Mikra v'chatargim is something that we should really take seriously and make sure that it is something that is strong. Rav Avadia has a tshuva where he discusses in Yechavadas just 2 or 3 closing ha'aras on this topic. Rav Avadia writes he's very upset. He does not know why people don't and the children are not taught in terms of laning, in terms of doing the parsha with Ta'amei HaMikra. Rav Avadia in Chilei Beis Simon Lamed Zayin is a very big supporter of that, and he says, "V'lo ka'osam hamanalim she'ena mashgichim klal olamid es talmidei beit hasefer Ta'amei HaMikra." No, you got to teach with Ta'amei HaMikra, and therefore Rav Avadia says you should do it with Ta'amim. Again, that's not quoted in the Shulchan Aruch or the other poskim. There is a drush I saw in the Margolias Hashash, which is a sefer with Hasidic Avarts on various Masechtas and Shas. So he quotes there from Reb Avram Moshe Zilberberg, who quotes, "Why is it Hamashlim Parshio Sav? Hamashlim Parshio Samatzibur. What do you mean Parshio Sav?" So he quotes Aderech Drush. A person, we all have our parsha in life. We have to be mashlim our parsha. Kala mashlim Parshio Sav Imatzibur. We might think that our parsha, I have to focus on my parsha. I can't focus on other people's parsha. I can't get other people involved. I don't have time to try to perfect others and have others involved in my life and being mashpia. No. Kala mashlim Parshiosav im hatzibur. If you're mashlim your parsha, but you're doing it with the tzibur as well, you're including, then marichon lo yamav shnosav. That's arichas yamav. That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu wants. He wants us to finish our parsha, to be mashlim our parsha, but with the tzibur, connecting with others as well. Okay, there's a special idea of learning on Shabbos as well. Again, the Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Zohar that one should be mechadish chidushim on Shabbos, and even if it's not chidushim, you should learn something new. You should review something that you haven't learned, review something that you don't remember. But either way, the Mishnah Berurah quotes that idea of learning on Shabbos, the special idea of learning on Shabbos. He quotes that in Simon Reish Sadi. I'll just quote it. The Mishnah Berurah quotes the Zohar. Mitzvah al ha'adam l'chadish chidush Torah b'Shabbos. Right, we just spoke about Shnayim Mikra. That doesn't have to be done on Shabbos. They can be done during the week. We didn't talk about that either. But either way, whatever you do. Some do an Aliyah day. Some do it all Friday night. Whatever you do is good. But the Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Zohar. Mitzvah al ha'adam l'chadish chidush Torah b'Shabbos. Should be mechadish something on Shabbos. Umi she'eno bar haki l'chadish. If somebody is not capable, they're not a chadshin, yilmo dvarim shalom adheina. Right? Learn something new. I think some of the Achronim, I think the Piskei Tshuva quotes that after our Neshama Yisera goes back to Shamayim, and every Motzi Shabbos, new, what'd you learn? Tell me a Chiddush. So we have to have something to tell. We have to have something to tell the Shamayim about what we learned on Shabbos. Okay. Let's continue to the next topic, Keriat HaTorah. Keriat HaTorah on Shabbos. So there are some special halachos. We're not going to go through all the laws of Keriat HaTorah that was discussed in an earlier Tzurba volume, but we're talking about Shabbos, the laning on Shabbos. So we know the Mishnah tells us in Maseches Megillah that every time there is laning, there is a certain number of aliyos, reflective of Kedushas Hayom. Weekday has 3, Chol HaMoed and Rosh Chodesh have 4, Yom Tov has 5, we paskin Yom Kippur has 6, and Shabbos has 7, the ultimate Kedushas Hayom, the makar for all Kedusha. And the Mishnah says in Megillah, in Surah 35, the 4th parak, B'Shabbos Shiva, Ein Pochsin Mehen, Ava Mosifan Aleyan. Right, not less, but more. You could add on to the 7, but not less. Umaftir and Benavi, and there's also Haftorah. What's the 7? So the Gemara there says it's Keneged. It's Keneged. There's 3, 5, and 7 Birchas Kohanim. 3 words in the first pasuk, 5 in the second, 7, and the Keneged Shlosha Shomer Yasaf. Another 3, 5, and 7 about officers. The question in the Mefarshim who exactly that is referring to. But that's one idea that is related to something in the pasuk. There's a beautiful Shibali Aleket. Again, Rav Tzidkiyahu Rofe, one of the Rishonim, in Surah 37, who says, maybe the 7 are, if somebody missed minyanim during the week, they want to make sure you get all your baruchus. So you're mashlim all your baruchus. So you have 7 aliyahs, so you get, everyone has a baruch as Hashem HaMavorach, so that helps help people make up if they missed any of the baruchus during the week. Okay. What about adding on more than 7? So it's possible, it's mutter. We say you're allowed to have hosafos. When you have a hosafa, so our minhag is we just break up the Torah into more sections. But the Rishonim deal with, what about reading something more than once? Reading an aliyah, keep it the 7 aliyahs that we have, reading Shishi 5 times. Reading Shishi 5 times. Do you do that? I was in a European country last year, and towards the end, they read Shishi about 10 times. They kept calling people up. I was like, when is this going to continue? They kept calling people up. They were going to call me up. I don't need an aliyah. But they kept calling people up. So the Raviyah, the Rishonim talk about this. The Raviyah quotes it, and he was very angry about this. The Raviyah is very angry. Again, even on Simchas Torah, he was upset about it. I left shul in anger. More than 4 times for a little staka. Shisha pshitim. They read it over and over again. Who told them they're allowed to do this? On Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh, we read a pasuk again, right? Zeh Ishesh, I think, right on the third pasuk on the Rosh Chodesh laning. So he says that's already dachuk. When the Gemara talks about that, Rav and Shmuel, what are you supposed to do? Lo efshar. But here, you shouldn't read something again. But that's a machlokas Rishonim. The Raviyah is very upset about it, but the Rivash says it's okay. The Rivash, Talmud of the Ran, source number 39, the Tshuva of the Rivash, Simin Peidalit, he quotes, he thinks it is mutter. V'nireh shehu mutter. After he quotes this question, is it a violation of lo sisa? Kiulai mashomer chazal that you're allowed to have 7. Ein pochsen have a mosifin aleim zekash seder aruch v'lo yisarach likro zeh mashakar zeh. Like the questioner says, like what we do. Maybe mosifin just means you could have more breaks, but not that you could read psukim over again. Maybe that's a bracha levatala. So the Rivash says it's okay. Nirashu mutter kivan sha'amru chazal ein mosif avo mosifin alein ve'ein kam mishum lo sisa kivan sha'yikarin tzrichen levarich ve'ein mishum shetzorach levanim likro zeh mashakara zeh ein bekaklum. Not a problem. After all, you find precedent. The Chanukah in Chutz La'aretz and others, Rosh Chodesh. So that is the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah both allow repetition in principle, but the Ramah says we only do it on Simchas Torah. That's generally the minhag. The Shulchan Aruch says, Mutter likros olam harbe. Source number 40. See where I am? Page 293. Mutter likros olam harbe. Afal pi shekara zeh ma shekara zeh chozer mevarich. Ein bekaklum. It's okay. The Shulchan Aruch says it is okay. The Magen Avraham says, if you read it again, that doesn't count towards the 7. Right? Mikol makom ein olam in yeshiv. You need 7 sectioned out over the parsha. But the Shulchan Aruch says technically you could repeat. The Ramah says v'yesh osrim, right? Because he's machmir for that. Raviyot lecharchila v'chein nagu b'medinos elu. Chutz mi b'simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is a rule breaker. It's a rule breaker in many ways. We lane at night. That's a rule breaker. We lane again. We give little kids. So that's the Ramah. The only on Simchas Torah where we have minhag. So again, the minhag in Ashkenazi communities follows the Ramah that we don't repeat psukim when we add aliyos. Sephardic communities, the Shulchan Aruch says Mikra din it's mutter, but the Birkei Yosef already says that it's better not to. Better not to if one could get away without it. Again, it comes up when you have a simcha. If you have a simcha, so then it's a little tricky. The Magen Avraham discusses in 43 a fascinating ha'ara. Right, we know the Shulchan Aruch says you have 7, but efshar lahosif you could add on. 1 second. We are many familiar with the Gemara and Megillah that in the days of old, only the first Ola made the bracha before his aliyah, and the last Ola made the bracha at the end of his aliyah. But none of the Olam in the middle made a bracha. So there's a takana. We make extra brachas mishum hanechnasim bayotzim. We want people to make sure that they hear the brachas. They don't think that the Torah is being read without a bracha. So you might think, you see, there was a tzarech. We allowed the extra brachas because there's a tzarech, because of nechnasim v'yotzim. So now with extra ones, so you might have thought that maybe it's not appropriate. You're causing more brachas to be said. You have 10 aliyahs, more brachas to be said. The Magen Avraham says, it's okay. It's okay. That's the minhag, especially if there is a simcha, a yartzeit, you need more aliyahs. Says the Magen Avraham, Reish Pei Beis Sif Aleph, Umashma B'chol HaPoskim, Sha'afilu. Afilu always means implicit question. And afilu in Tosfos, and afilu in a posek. Afilu ha'idna shekulan mevarchin. And even though today where everybody makes a bracha, and you might have thought that's causing extra brachas levatala, mutar lahosif. You're allowed. Shere gam bizman Talmud. Because even in the days of the Gemara, hayakol echan mevarech v'afilu hachikas v'aposkim shemutar lahosif. Even earlier, you're allowed to be mosif. Ke nirali de'ol lo ka'ola Shabbos, not like the olas Shabbos. And the Rashbat says, Kulan mevarchin ein lahosif V'chein roi linhog im lo b'magam chasna obris. Okay, so if there's no tzorech, then you should keep the number. And also it's nice to have 7, because 7 is keneged, certain, as we saw, ramazim. But if there is a need, so then that is what we do, and that's the Maggid Avram's. The Maggid Avram Lamaisa sounds like you shouldn't have Hosafas unless there is a need to. Piskei Tshuva summarizes and says, right, we have different minhagim. Matzina l'shnayim migdoli olam shekpidu. Shel olam lo lahosef al shiva kruim. Some don't. Va'av shelo kiyesh chasuna v'chadome. Right, unless there's a wedding or simcha. But the minhag is lahakel in many places. Some shuls kavua are mosif. But again, this definitely has to be balanced with the idea of tircha d'tzibura, which we don't want to cause. Chazal were so careful. Remember, we had in recent shiurim that we don't say a longer Shemona Esrei because of tircha d'tzibura. So extra aliyas could cause even more time. So one has to weigh the values of the extra aliyos with that. Could a katan get an aliyah? So the Mishnah tells us, if you remember, in Megillah Daf Chav Gimel, source number 45, not the Mishnah, the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Hakol olam minyan shiva, everyone could count forward towards the 7 minimum. Afilu katan, afilu isha, even a katan or a woman. Avalamr chachamim isha lo tikra b'tzibur b'nei kavod tzibur. Chachamim say not a woman, kavod tzibur. That's not our topic today. But let's talk about katan. What about a katan? So the Shulchan Aruch says, yeah, a katan could get one of the aliyahs. Shulchan Aruch, Reish Pei Beis, Hakol Olam Minyan Shiva, Afilu Isha V'Katan, Shiodei Lemim Avarchim. But we don't give women, but the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say about Katan. So the Sephardim custom is that children under 13, as long as they know who they're making a bracha to, they understand, they can get an aliyah. The Ramah says, Ve'elu dafka mitzarfen leminyan akruim, avalo sheyiu kulam nashim ktanim. The Ramah says, well, maybe if there's 1 or 2 of them, they can't all be ktanim, because that would be a problem. That would you're allowed to be mitzarif them, but you can't just have a whole minyan of that. The Maggid Avram does say, though, even for the Shulchan Aruch, that a katan can get an aliyah. And in the days of old, everybody read their own aliyah. The katan cannot read an aliyah for someone else. Avolios hu makri einu yachal achiyavishtei cyrus. But for him to be a makri to others, says the Maggid Avram, that does not work. And the Pri Megadim is makel even here. Pri Megadim says no. Olin the minyan shiva means he's a bar hachi for this. This is all a din rabbanan. Chazal say that they could be motzi. The Maggid and Pri Megadim in the next source 48. Katan shadayin lo hevi shtei cyrus yachal likros olam keminagenu. Right, he could read for others. What if he's the best balkorei? Nobody else knows alening. To tikkun neviim hu shikru b'torah. It's a din rabbanan. To din Rabbanan to read in the Torah. Va'asi Rabbanan, mafik Rabbanan. He's b'chuyev Rabbanan. So he's mostly others in the Rabbanan. And therefore the Pri Megadim is comfortable with saying that not only a katan could get one, but he could be motzi others. So in principle, it seems like a child could get an aliyah and read it for himself and maybe even be motzi others. Rav Moshe writes at length in the Igros Moshe, in this Shuva and others, that we should follow the Maggid Avram. We should follow the Maggid Avram, that a katan cannot read on behalf of others, even under Shas HaTchak. Unless the only time Rav Moshe allowed it is, let's say the bar mitzvah boy prepared the wrong parsha, and there's a huge tzarech, and he prepared the parsha, but his bar mitzvah was on Monday. I once was involved in such a case. The kid prepared, he didn't realize the bar mitzvah was his bar mitzvah was on Monday, and the Shabbos before, 2 days before, he prepared that whole parsha for a year, and now what do you do? So Rav Moshe says, Mikol makom ledinim hu tsar gadol lebar mitzvah u'mishpachto v'rotza kova terasa harmala hakel be'pri megadim v'dimei. Right, this requires the Pri Megadim, not just the Shulchan Aruch. The Pri Megadim that the katan can be motzi others in the kriya. So Rav Moshe is meko in that case. So Rav Avadia also says because it's a machlokes, then we should generally not allow it. But if the katan is the one that knows the lady the best, so then obviously we would allow him to. Fine, that is all regarding a katan in. Being motzi others. What about maftir? So again, even before we get to maftir, there's a couple of other sources here. Rav Avadia notes that many communities do not allow a katan, but I would. But if there's a minhag not to, so then one shouldn't do it. Fine, that's shachris and the 7 aliyas and katan. The Gemara says that we know, the Gemara Baba Kama, source 54 now, on page 298, we lane by Mincha as well. We lane the following week. This is one of the takanas of Ezra. Sheikarim b'Mincha b'Shabbos. Why? Because of Yoshvei Kronos. because of those who don't hear the laning during the week, so we lane for the give them extra kriya. Not 100% clear how that works. You can make it up, have an extra one, so everybody has an extra one. We want to get them an extra kriya, so therefore we have this laning on by Shabbos Mincha. Okay, what about maftir? Let's talk about maftir. Maftir and Haftorah. The last Ola, as we know, is called the Bal Maftir. There is a machlokes, there's a question in the Gemara. Megillah Chav Gimel. There's a question whether the Maftir counts as one of the 7. Maftir, what does Maftir mean? Lahaftir means to go away from. Like some of the Haftorah is when you went away, somebody is niftar. They go away to the next world. Right? Haftorah. Ein maftir achar pesach afikomen. It's always at the end. So, does the maftir count as one of the 7? The one who's going to read the Haftorah, does that count as one of the 7? That's a machlokas. Machlokas in the Gemara. Maftir maushi alo l'minyan shiva. Rav Huna Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Chad amar ola v'chad amar eino ola. Right? Machlokas. What's the machlokas about? So the Gemara says, Man damar ola, the one who says the maftir counts as one of the 7. Well, he's reading from the Torah, so he counts as one of the 7. Man damar eino ola, the one who says doesn't count, holds that the only reason maftir reads from the Torah is, well, he's going to lane the Haftorah. And we don't want to compare Haftorah and Torah. So the Haftorah, we also give him some of the Torah. So it's clear that it's not equalizing, that there's a koreh for Torah and there's a koreh. No, we don't want that to be equal. Says the Gemara, if it's only Kavod Torah, then it does not count for the minyan. So what do we paskin? Right, about the maftir being one of the minyan shiva. So the Rosh notes that whenever possible, me'ikar adin, the maftir can count leminyan shiva. And that's why, let's say, on a fast day, right, or on Yom Kippur mincha, even when we have Haftorah, we don't have an extra maftir. So me'ikar adin, that's what we paskin, but we try not to. So on days that we have 7, so that is why we don't count them. That's the Rosh in Megillah, in the 3rd parak. V'hilchasa maftir ola. The maftir is ola l'minyan shiva. Lakach anu noagin b'tainis b'mincha u'b'tishava u'b'yom kippurim. Avol b'shabes hashmini maftir. Right, shmini on Yantif, it's the 6th one, because people aren't rushing out to work. Lefisha on a rotzim lasos min agenu alibet to kuli alma. We want to try to be yotzei kuli alma. And that also, the Rosh says, that's what explains our minhag of we say kaddish. We say kaddish before maftir, also to be mafsik. We mentioned, I think, in the last year, there are different types of purposes of different kaddishes. There's a kaddish hamitzaref, right, that brings everybody together as a tzibur. That's what we spoke about. But there's also a kaddish hamafsik. So the kaddish before maftir is the kaddish hamafsik. It's mafsik to show that what's afterwards, it's not part of the minyan, not part of the minyan shiva, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch quotes. Shulchan Aruch quotes that in 59. Noagim likros shiva v'ligmar yimah parsha v'yomer kaddish v'chozer v'korim hamaftir mashakara hashvi. Good. Then we get to Haftorah. So what's the Haftorah about? Some of the Navi. This is, again, some learning Navi today is really needs a chizuk. We spoke about Shnayim Mikra. We have to learn Torah. We also have to learn Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Right? We also have to learn Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Right? There's a Rashi in Kisisa that says, what's the definition of a Talmud Chacham? Somebody who knows Chav Dalet Kisvei HaKodesh. Doesn't say no Shas and Poskim. Chav Dalet Sifrei HaKodesh. Right? Kisvei HaKodesh. So we have to learn Tanakh. Okay. So the Torah already quotes the idea of laning the Haftorah. The Torah in Siman Reish Pei Daled, source number 60. Umaftir b'Navi ben Yanash al Parsha. The Navi always has something connected to do with the Parsha or with the time of year. Right? It could be Shkalim, it could be Chanukah. So it could be in the olden days they used to lane special Haftorahs when there was a Chassan in the base medrash. So a Haftorah has something to do with the laning or what's going on the Jewish calendar. So the Torah says, Maftir b'Navi ben Yanash al Parsha, and it has to be at least 21 psukim. Unless there's a whole inyan that's less than 21 psukim, like we know laning. It has to be at least 10 psukim, unless it's a whole inyan, like Purim morning, when we only have 9 psukim. So it has to be at least 21, because there are 7 aliyahs, at least 3 psukim kineged each of these 7 aliyahs. The Abu Dram says, what does it have to do with laning? Because there used to be a gzeira. The Abu Dram 900 years ago tells us, one of the Rishonim, Surah 61, they made a gzeira, no kriyas HaTorah. So they wanted to have a Navi, one of the prophets, that would remind us, something connected. That's why you have the minimum amount, and that's why it's always connected somehow to the Torah. Good. Laning, we know, requires a kosher Sefer Torah. Kriyas Megillah requires a kosher Megillah. So what about Haftorah? So the Lavush is Mordechai Yafe, right? A contemporary, right? Who lived 1530 to 1612, right? A contemporary of the Ramah. He learned from the Ramah, from the Marshal, very early. He was a Rav in Prague and then in Posen. So his seforim, all his seforim are based on one pasuk in the Megillah. Mordechai Yafe was his name, but he has Lavush Malchus is on Arachayim, and then Butzvar Gaman is on another one of the seforim, and Ir Shushan, I think, is on Yeridea. I forgot exactly what they all are. Ora is a sefer on Rashi. All of his seforim are named based on that pasuk. So the Lavush says, Tamahati, I don't understand why people don't use a cloth for Haftorah. Kol Yamai Shelo Ra'isi be'echa min hamakomos shenogin lift of Haftorahs kedin sefer. Why don't people use it? She'ein yotzin b'tzibur klal. The whole takanav is reading the Haftorah. So just like we have a kosher sefer Torah, just like we have a kosher Megillah for Kriyas and Megillah, so too he doesn't understand. And the Taz argues, and the Taz says no. That wasn't the custom. That wasn't the chiyuv, right? There's no halachic difference between a klaf of haftorahs, which is what the Lavush was talking about also, or a printed chumash. There's no difference, says the Taz, right? And therefore, the Taz says it is okay. Reish Pei Daled Beis, it is okay to read it from a printed chumash. Imkain, he says in the Hemshech, Afilum yu nechtavim ein lahem din sefer elam shemeis lasol Hashem hachanami b'chumashim anfasim datfus yish b'mamish. It is okay. The Magen Avraham agrees with the Taz that the printing has the same status as writing, but he says because you could nowadays print a whole Sefer Nevi'im, it's better. It's better, says the Magen Avraham, to use a whole Sefer Nevi'im and not what we would call a Haftorah book. We're just the Haftorahs, right? And that's what the Magen Avraham says. Hashta d'shen is galsa meleches atfus, where we have printing press, which was a couple hundred years before. Vasfarim todala kel bizol. You shouldn't just use a Haftorah book. You should use a whole Sefer Yoshua, a whole Sefer, or a whole Tanakh. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Taz, who was Machmir, then the Magen Avraham, and the Minhag Olam. Bevadei Nachon, the Mishnah Berurah says l'chadchila, to have a klaf written kedin, and there you probably have to use a balkore there, like you use in for the Torah, because most people don't know the Haftorahs. But there are many that rely on the Magen Avraham. The Rav Avadia even says, mitzvah lahader in Yechav Adas, mitzvah lahader likra Haftorah mitoch sefer hakasub b'ksav yad ubiktush ala klaf l'chadchila on a klaf v'yafilu imhu rak likud Haftorah shel shapsos hashana ve'no sefer nevi shalem. What if you have a klaf of just the Haftorahs versus a printed Tanakh? Says Rav Avadia, the klaf comes first. But many congregations, many kehilas today use a chumash or a book with all the haftarahs. Some use a Tanakh, right? Many, very small percentage use a klaf. The Piskei Tshuva quotes that Mikra din, we pass on like the Magen Avraham. Who could read the haftarah? Who could read it? So again, the question is, could you have somebody who reads the haftarah and not the Torah? That's what's discussed in the Rishonim. We often have the opposite. You have a regular balkorei, so the person, so to speak, the maftir who's Ola, is reading it with that Ola, but he doesn't know how to read the Haftorah. He'll get somebody else to read the Haftorah. But the Rivash in the Tshuva and the Beis Yosef spoke about it the other way. Could you have somebody just read the Haftorah? Because the whole point is that you don't want something to look like comparing, there's somebody who reads the Torah and somebody reads the Haftorah. Remember, Kavod HaTzibur. That's why the Baal Haftorah reads from the Torah as well. But many are Mekel. The Ramah says in Surah 70, someone else could read it. The Ola generally makes the bracha. Right, it's better to have one person make the brachas at least and say it along with him. That's not what the Ramah is talking about. The Ramah is talking about even if he doesn't make the brachas. But it's best to have somebody who can make the brachas, and even if somebody else says the Haftorah with them, like a balkore, that is okay. And that's what the Yaskal Avdi, the Ravadia Hadaya, ends off and says that even from a chumash, right, if the balkore reads the Haftorah on behalf of the maftir, it is okay. Anyone could go, and that's the minhag. The accepted custom is that anyone could get the Haftorah. Generally, he makes the brachas. In Achinami, he ends off, Im Yechon Lasakin Dafilu Ksharon B'chumash Rak Achazin Hu Yiyakore Bevade Mutter. It's okay. L'chol adam lasos gam mishi ini yodea biyadias bas rabo. Right? If he could say it, it is okay. But either way, we should be careful about Haftorah. We should listen to Haftorah and we should learn Navi and at least learn the messages. If we're not learning all the rest of Tanakh, at least study the Haftorah, even though there's no chiyuv of Shnayim Mikra regarding the Haftorah. Okay, we'll have to stop here. By the Shem, next time We pick up with the 8th Shiur, which starts us in the world of Kiddush. Okay, we'll stop here.